Today's forum featuring Buck Rinehart is part of a Columbus Metropolitan Club series called the Leadership Legacy Series. This series is presented by Taft Law with a series support for this forum from QSI and the Robert Weiler Company. Please thank our sponsors and welcome Rocky Saxby of Taft to the stage to introduce our speakers. Rocky?
Thank you, Richie. It's very much a pleasure and a privilege for the Taft Law Firm, along with Bob Weiler and Quick Solutions and Rinehart, Rischel, and Kuckler, to bring to you our guests today are both honorables. And I think are well known to everybody. But starting with Buck, Buck is I guess you could call him Two Buck, because he's a graduate of Ohio State as an undergraduate and a graduate of the Moritz College of Law, where he graduated cum laude. And he got into politics fairly quickly. And as you probably recall, served as our Franklin County Treasurer from 1976 to 1984. He was a candidate for state treasurer on the Republican ticket in the disastrous year for us Republicans in 1982. Actually, Buck led the ticket that year, and I was close behind. I think Tony Celebrezzi eked out a victory over me by no more than 1 million votes. Following that, the people of Columbus elected Buck, who served 8 years as our mayor. And as the Columbus Dispatch described Buck, there was no idea too big, no plan too outrageous for Buck. I think what I'm most proud of Buck about, in addition to his public service and our personal friendship and his success as a practicing attorney, is many of you do not know that Buck Rinehart retired as a lieutenant colonel in the United States Marine Corps. And very thankful for your service there, Buck. And he's going to be interviewed here today by State Representative Michael Curtin, also an honorable who serves us from Marble Cliff, but is probably better known to all of us because of his long career, 34 years with the Columbus Dispatch, where he wrote 38 years. I never thought you'd leave. Mike went from a beat reporter covering City Hall, the county, the state, and eventually became editor and associate publisher, and is the associate publisher emeritus for the Columbus Dispatch. He did everything for the Dispatch except change his name to Wolf. The era of the Rinehart administration was called, I don't know if it had been Mike, but the Dispatch called those 8 years as tumultuous, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about it here today. Mike Curtin, Buck Rinehart.
Thank you, Rocky. This is the Buck Rinehart chapter in the CMC's Distinguished Leadership Legacy Series. And to set the stage for our discussion of the stories behind the stories, which we hope Buck will tell, of the Rinehart years as mayor, I will very briefly recap the biological background that delivered this unique individual to the doors of City Hall. Dana Gilman Rinehart was the oldest of 4 children born to Major Paul G. and Kay Rinehart. Major Rinehart was an Air Force bomber pilot, and his plane was labeled the Flying Buckaroo. That's a fact. Hence, when Dana came along in 1946, he was obviously the little Buckaroo, and he's been Bucky or Buck ever since. He prefers Buck, by the way. Like so many military families, the Rineharts were transferred all over these United States. So Buck attended elementary schools in 8 different states, which may explain a little bit about his personality. His high school was the Florida Military School. After graduation from the Florida Military School in 1964, he landed a job with J. Edgar Hoover's FBI in Washington, D.C., handling public relations, some of J. Edgar's correspondence, we understand, and some things that he still won't talk about. He enlisted in the Marine Reserves in 1966, and for the next 37 years was a member of either the Marine or Naval Reserves for this country. In 1965, upon retirement from the Air Force, Buck's dad settled the family in Columbus. Because of all the many cities in which he and the family had been stationed, Major Rinehart thought that Columbus was the cleanest and best city that they had experienced. In 1967, Buck joined his family in Columbus and enrolled at The Ohio State University, earning his undergraduate degree in political science, cum laude, and in 1970, his law degree, cum laude, in '73. Buck joined a Columbus law firm. He ran stupidly and unsuccessfully for the Republican primary for county auditor against the legendary Arch Warren, then wised up in 1976 and ran against the fatally flawed Herb Pfeiffer for county treasurer, won that race handily and was reelected in 1980. In 1983, a race I covered from wall to wall all year, Rinehart was elected the 50th mayor of Columbus in a close, hard-fought campaign against Democratic County Commissioner Mike Dorian. That race was to determine who would follow the 3-term, quietly effective Republican Tom Moody. And Buck, in his anything but quiet, exuberant, and successful campaign for mayor, you repeatedly pledged to arrest the crooks, put out the fires, fill the potholes, and pick up the trash. With that preface, before we start peppering you with specific questions, could you address, in a relatively brief manner, your guiding philosophy and the tone that you tried to set for your tenure at City Hall?
First of all, thank you very much for that very kind and generous introduction. And Rocky, you forgot to mention that you were a lieutenant in the Marine Corps in Vietnam. I never had the honor of serving in Vietnam, but I thank you for your service to our country. Well, this is a great honor for me to even be included in this legacy series because I'm not dead. And although it's been a little difficult in the last year, I feel very much alive and very grateful to the medical community in Columbus that pulled my coals out of the fire. I think I can answer a bunch of questions by sharing with my friends here, and I see so many of you that I know so well. I mean, to say friends, there are members of my cabinet here, people who were administrators in the city government when I had the opportunity to serve as mayor, and there are close personal friends in this room, including my partners in the law business and my wife and my son, Gil. So I feel like I'm speaking to friends so I can be bluntly honest.
As though you weren't before.
Yeah, I'm not going to change anything. But when I took office in 1984, we had 2 philosophies that I asked my colleagues to follow religiously, and if they weren't comfortable with those 2 philosophies, they would be happy to work someplace else. The first one I borrowed from professor named Richard Lamb in Colorado. And it is this: it is an iron rule of history that great nations eventually have great problems. The same is true with cities. Greatness is not a permanent geopolitical status in this country or any country. And that's the same with cities. Either you go up with prosperity or you go down. But cities, like countries, never stand still. And if that were not true, we'd all be speaking Greek or Latin. But history shows that great cities rise to their time on the stage and then decline. The question I told my cabinet was not if we will decline, if decline takes place, it's when decline takes place. God didn't turn out to be any more of an American than he was English, French, Greek, Egyptian, so on. Prosperity is not a guarantee. It's a challenge, and that must be earned by every generation. And if I preached that one day, I preached it for 8 years. The other philosophy, abiding philosophy, you probably have thought of, and that was Winston Churchill. Never give in. Never give in. Never, never, never. In nothing great or small, large or petty, never give in. Now, that doesn't mean never negotiate, but never give in. If you want to preserve your own integrity and sense of self-worth, you don't give in, and sometimes you fail. And we had some failures. But those were the two abiding philosophies that surround the issues that Mike and I have talked about that he wants me to address today.
So Buck, it's January 1984. You're a newly minted 30-something mayor, one of the younger mayors in the modern history of Columbus. And after talking about putting out fires and filling potholes and picking up the trash for an entire year, you find yourself with the biggest backlog project on the books in a long, long time, the I-670 freeway, which had originally been planned in 1965, had not progressed at all by the time you took office. Funding and environmental issues had bogged it down, and it was a top priority for the civic leadership of this town. How did you and your administration go about trying to break that logjam and get that last missing link of Ohio's interstate system built?
I'm sure they got sick of hearing me talk about it. But here we are, at the time, the 16th largest city in America. Now we're the 15th. And we've got a 4-lane highway to the zoo and a 2-lane residential back road to their airport. So I went to Governor Celeste and I said, we've got to build this highway. It's been designed over and over and over again. Got to build it. He says, we can't. We can help you a little bit with our 20% or whatever, but the President of the United States has frozen the Highway Trust Fund, and you've got to get into it. Okay, that's all I need is a target. So Reagan was the president, and I called Lever, standing in the West Wing of the White House, the political affairs guy, who was wonderful, former dean at Brown University, and I said, I need you to go in to talk to the president and tell him to release the Highway Trust Fund at least for $300 million, which is like them spending a quarter, okay? I need this money for I-670. I'm not doing that, said Lee. You do it on your own. I said, well, I want an appointment. Well, I can get you an appointment with Don Regan, his chief of staff. And so anyway, long story short, I went to Washington and met Don Regan, who was about as friendly as a snake. I said, I-670. He said, what state? What town? I said, the 15th or 16th largest city in the United States, in the heart of Ohio. Now, this is before 1980, when he ran for re-election. And it was after 1980, I'm sorry. But he was very sensitive to Ohio. And so Reagan didn't call me back. That's a no-go. So I called him every damn day. And I showed up in his office in the West Wing of the White House. I mean, the reception, the Marines at the door recognized me. Here he is again. I beat on that door, back to never give in, never give in. Beat that door till $300 million or whatever the number was. I'm probably off by a few million. That was cheap for Don Regan to pay to get me out of his hair. And, but I come back. I come back for pandas, and I come back for a lot of other things. But anyway, so that portion then allowed me to go to Governor Celeste and say, the president's changed his mind. He's going to let you have the Columbus portion of the Highway Trust Fund to build this highway. And Governor Celeste says, great, you got the big chunk. I'll provide the little chunk. We only had enough to build it from downtown to the airport. But that was enough. Can you imagine today all that traffic being on Broad Street? I mean, so I was all over Gisela and later Joe Ridgway to get the damn thing built yesterday. There are a lot of side stories of that, but Mike, the intransigence of this mayor being in the White House all the time on this project, I think helped a lot.
Quick postscript, Senator Jim Hughes, who's with us today, has introduced legislation to name a portion of I-670 the Dana G. Buck Rinehart Expressway. Well-deserved piece of legislation.
Thank you, Jim.
Today, Columbus is vying, seriously vying, for a national political convention in 2016, something that would have been unheard of not that many years ago. In the mid-'80s, Buck, when you're mayor, Columbus was just beginning to believe that it could compete in the convention trade with bigger cities, but first it needed bigger, first-rate space that we didn't have. Explain the significance of, and the story behind the story, if you will, of the development of the Greater Columbus Convention Center and Columbus's blossoming into a true convention city.
Well, you move the snow first, pick up the garbage next. And if you get that stuff done, then you can talk about a toy. And the convention center was perceived by most people in Columbus as something they wouldn't use. It didn't mean a whole lot to them. But in terms of civic pride, I mean, here we are, the capital of Ohio, and we don't have a convention center. I mean, this is ridiculous. So I was on the warpath. Meanwhile, I was on a lot of warpaths, but this was one of them. And the business leaders all agreed. I mean, J.W. Wolf and Les Wexner agreed. I know you find that hard to believe, but they totally agreed on the need for a convention center. But what we had to do was figure out the funding. Who's going to pay for it? If the Harry and Harriet homeowner don't want to pay for it, how is it going to get paid for? Well, that took collaboration with the county. And I turned to Pat Power and Claire Azuka. Then director, Pat was the director of finance and Claire was the deputy director. Pat always said, Claire has all the brains, but I'm the leader. And together with the county commissioners who were changing periodically at that time, we worked out a funding mechanism where we would share the potential liability from the naysayers. And I could go in front of any Rotary Club or whatever and say this convention center will pay for itself. Once that agreement was reached, then it was a matter of breaking ground. In the middle of that, Les Wexner decided to have a contest for design. I didn't want to mess with a contest. I wanted to build the convention center yesterday. So we had this design contest. I won't comment on that. I was not in favor of it, but if you've got X millions of dollars invested of your own money in this thing, money talks, bullshit walks. And same with Capital South and all that stuff. So the funding, once the funding mechanism was in place, then we went ahead and built it. Now, here's the bottom line. Not one day since that was built has there been a claim on the city or the county for one nickel. It has paid for itself every step of the way. And it's paying now for major expansion. And so, anyway, that's the history of the convention center.
1985.
1985.
With the help of racing legends Jim Truman and Bobby Rahal, you brought to downtown Columbus the Columbus Ford Dealers 500 auto race with all sorts of noise reverberating off the downtown buildings, which we all loved. 40,000 people showed up. 40,000 people showed up for this race, downtown Columbus, Buck. But after 4 years, that race was gone. Give us a capsule of bringing out the town, what it did and what it didn't do.
Well, you know, again, whether it's the zoo or the race or 1992 celebration or Ameriflora or anything like that, I was pushing for all of that. All of that. I wanted Columbus to come out of its shell and to capture someone else's attention. Columbus 500, I mean, I'm not a race aficionado, but any more than I'm a ballet aficionado. But ballet is important. I mean, look at what's going on in the arts side in the Mershon Center today, let alone the Rife Center and the Southern Hotel and all that. Well, we need a major league sport. IMSA came along and said, you want to bid on this? I said, I've been to the bidding wars before, or Major League Baseball with Bidwell for the Cardinals football team. Yeah, where do we get in line? And we bid and we won the October dates because of Jim Truman. He was on the IMSA board. And he lobbied hard for it. And the race got us worldwide attention, worldwide. Now, that means something to a lot of businesses in Columbus. But unfortunately, Jim Truman got cancer and died 4 years later, and that left the spark plug out of the car. We needed $300,000 to make it to the next year up front. Then they would pay the city back. And I went to Jerry Hammond and he said, it's your race, you come up with the money. And that was the end of that. So the Phoenix, good old Terry, whatever his name is, was the mayor of Phoenix. And he told me in Jerusalem when we were together, he said, I'm going to steal your race dates. And he did. And they now have an October race in Phoenix. But the race got us recognition that the city would not have gotten otherwise, at least for 4 years. So that's the
Next one, Buck, is a 2-minute answer. You spent all of '83 talking about arresting cooks, putting out fires, picking up garbage. It was great campaign stuff. despite talking all year long in '83 about arresting crooks as a job of the cops, when you became mayor, you started putting a lot of effort into making sure the public saw their police officers in ways other than just arresting crooks and other unfortunate circumstances. The DARE program, the Hot Pursuit musical band, the mounted police, the motorcycle police, on and on. You supported all these efforts to put the police in a different light. What was your philosophy behind all that, and what worked?
When do kids see police? When something bad happens. They don't go to police graduations. They don't go to awards ceremonies. And they're going to grow up and be part of our community, hopefully, and leaders in our community. I wanted to polish the cop shop. And Dwight Joseph agreed. He was the chief of police at the time. And so when Hot Pursuit came up, I said, get them out to every middle school. When DARE program came up, boom, get them out to every elementary school, 5th grade. And we included the Catholic schools in that effort. There are kids who are adults today, who were 5th graders then, who still have their DARE t-shirts and their Hot Pursuit albums converted to CDs and all that kind of stuff. Motorcycles was something the police wanted. Mounted police was something I wanted because it allows them to be seen in a proud way, and that improves their effectiveness. I don't want a bunch of mean cops running around Columbus, arresting every kid and beating on bad people and all that. There's got to be a good side, and there is a good side, but you got to look for it. You got to think about it. You got to create it. And Dwight Joseph was a creative guy. I'm going to go over hold on. Now, I got a lot of questions when Dwight retired and Jim Jackson got appointed. The mayor appoints the chief of police. So I had Al Montgomery do all the tests and interviewed by all these chiefs of police of 5 cities in the country, big cities, and all that. All the results came back. Jim Jackson was number 1. Number 1 on the test, number 1 on the interview, number 1 on personal conduct, background investigation. He was clearly number 1 out of the 5 deputy chiefs. Now, what if I don't appoint him? I better have a damn good reason. So I called Jim Jackson in, and I said, now, Jim, you were a Marine. I'm a Marine. We understand orders. I'm the mayor and you're not. Let's start with that. Now, we've got some programs going on in the cop shop that I happen to like. Don't touch them. He said, yes, sir. And off he went. And I had a very peaceful remaining time in office with Jim Jackson as chief of police. He never touched them. He would complain about manpower and say, we need to put Hot Pursuit back on the street. And I said, no, we're not doing that. Hot Pursuit is going to do what they're doing in the schools. We can afford that. We'll figure out how to get you more cops. And we got along marvelously. When I left office, it fell apart. But we still have mounted police. We still have motorcycles. Hot Pursuit is no longer around. The DARE program has been waned down. But anyway, that was the background to that.
In about 5 minutes, we're going to get to audience Q&A, so start thinking about what you want to ask Buck. In the meantime, I'm going to try to get 2 or 3 done before that.
Okay.
As Rocky alluded to, Buck, in your long and storied career, never once were you accused of being too laid back. Never was this more true than on August 1, 1990, when you took the controls of a low-and-deck wrecking crane at the old Ohio Penitentiary, even though the city did not have title to the site. Was this rational or irrational exuberance?
That's a good way of putting it. Well, at the time, I thought it was rational. Look, the background is very simple. I could not, or no one could get the Ohio General Assembly to agree with Columbus City Council on the destiny of that site. And I got frustrated. I mean, That's why I'm not governor today. Because I couldn't get them to work together. I mean, here's this piece of junk and we're going into the 1992 celebration, 500th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's voyage. Ameriflora is going on. Jack Hanna's doing a great job at the zoo, blah, blah, blah. I mean, all these things are going, we had Columbus 500 then and all that, and we're off like a rocket ship, and we've got this anchor. So I called Ralph Lowendick, God rest his soul, and I said, I need a wrecking ball out on Long Street, and what time, what day? And I told him, we agreed on it, and I said, said to my staff, some of whom were here, and have their own version of this story. I told my staff, I said, I'm going to go punch a hole in this thing. I want to wake some people up. And I did, over my staff's objection. They said, we don't even own the damn thing. I said, it's in the middle of our town. That's good enough for me. I'll declare martial law, and I'll go out and bang a hole in it. Well, look what's there today. $3 billion worth of investment in that area.
Okay, wrap that baby up.
Okay. I wrapped it up.
I'm going to combine two questions into one, and it's going to be my last one before we go to the audience, so please get ready to pepper Buck on your own. Two questions, Buck, clearly related. Our Main Street always has been and probably always will be High Street. For every mayor, always a work in progress. How did you approach this perpetual task of enlivening our most crucial artery? And tied to that, of course, the Short North. In the early to mid-'70s, when I was a young reporter, the Short North is where I would go when I needed to find some poor, down-and-out, Damon Runyon-esque type figure to interview in a dive bar for a sob story. Today, it's where we take all of our out-of-towners to make a big impression on the city. So in the book of Urban Rehab, you know, what's the lesson there? So High Street, Short North, then, now, and into the future. What is the main lesson for us?
Well, Short North is a separate story. Had it not been for Sandy Wood, we'd have never had the public-private partnership that we established. But here's the bottom line on Short North. $2 million of public money leveraged $20 million of private money in the first year, just to start that rehabilitation. So we get started on High Street, and we might as well finish the job. So we blew up downtown High Street because the infrastructure underneath it, I mean, we're talking about one step up from wooden pipes. It was terrible. Everybody kept repaving it. You're repaving your problem. You're dealing cosmetically. You're not dealing with the substance. So we tore everything out, all the way down to the crossover by the bridge, by the courthouse, to the new I-670 crossover. Tore it all up, down 4 feet. Joe Ridgway says, you gotta be kidding me. We're doing this. I said, now, so I had gone to Vern Rife to get our capital improvements budget amended so we could have the money to do High Street. And he said, Mayor, look out my window. So I was up in his office. I looked out his window, and he says, you've got all High Street torn up. Yeah, we sure do, because we're going into the 1992 celebration, and we're going to have a spiffy-looking downtown. He said, well, right there at the corner, I'd like to see a tunnel from the Rife Center to the underground parking garage. I said, you would? Yeah. Can you do that? So I called Joe Ridgway, who was the service director at the time. I said, Joe, how much would it cost us to drill a hole, go down and put a tunnel in down there? Well, Mayor, I don't know. Find out. Call me back in 30 seconds. And so he calls me back, and I'm still in Rife's office, and he says, it'll be about $6 million. We don't have $6 million. We don't have $6,000. I said to the speaker, I said, Mr. Speaker, it's going to cost $6 million. And he says, you got it. I said, say that again. Real loud. You got it. We'll amend the capital improvements budget. You'll have your $6 million if that's what it costs. If it costs more than that, let me know. Give me a call. It's been great talking with you, Mayor. I mean, I really enjoyed our chat today. And off I went, and all of a sudden we had $6 million more. And there is today a tunnel that runs from the Rife Center to the underground parking garage, and it ought to be named the Vern Rife Tunnel. So don't tell me Democrats and Republicans can't get along. They can get along.
It is the Columbus Metropolitan Club's tradition, as you know, to take audience questions. Please go to the microphone, state your name, and ask your question. We thank you in advance for stifling long editorial comments, which Buck has suffered enough of in his long and storied career. Carol.
My name is Carol Looper, and Buck Rinehart will still be great television. You were great to cover. You were a great mayor, memorable, and I just have one question. Any regrets?
No, Carol. Basically, I love that job so much, and I love my staff so much, and I love this city so much. I could have done that for the rest of my life. But I knew at the end of 8 years, I was burning people out, right and left. I mean, the ones that retired, died, and all that stuff. And I didn't want to go there. So I figured, okay, there's enough foundation laid at the airport, at the zoo, with the Red, White, and Boom, with neighborhood organizations, that somebody else can drive the train. And so, no, I don't have any regrets. I love the people of this city. I am still searching for, just one second, I'm searching for a woman. I've never found her. But she sent me a postcard in the first month on the job. And the postcard was, "To whom it may concern, Columbus Mayor's Office." My staff, of course, handle all the mail. This postcard says, "Tell Dana Rinehart she's doing a real good job." Listen to this. In spite of the fact that she's a Democrat. So, obviously my staff framed that, hung it in the office for everybody to see that came in, and everybody saw it. And I never found that. She had her name on it and all that, and I never found her. But I love the job.
Jane.
It's the greatest job in the world. Jane?
Jane Scott, Columbus Metropolitan Club. Thank you both for doing this. It's why I do my job. You're also an inspiration for my life philosophy, ask forgiveness rather than permission. We all have moments in our lives where time stands still and you take this indelible snapshot and you know it's a life-changing moment. I'd like to hear some of your life-defining, life-changing moments.
Well, other than when my kids were born and marrying Brenda, which was a life-defining moment. From a public standpoint, I will never forget being in Beijing in 1986, China, and having that lull in one morning that we were there to get pandas. We were negotiating the hell out of the pandas. Nobody gets pandas, nobody, but I was determined. Anyway, so we're in Xi'an, China, and we're scheduled to go to see the zoo. And I said, I'm not going to have the press and everybody on my staff sitting around here in this hotel with nothing to do till noon. Get us a bus, I told the Chinese, and they got us a bus. And get us the guides and the people, the CIA, equivalent of our CIA that watched every move we made. This was before Tiananmen Square, of course. And I said, I want to go to a school. I want to see little kids in China. And how old? I said, 8 years old. I don't know how they do their system. Anyway, everybody loads onto this bus. They're dragging cameras and all this kind of stuff. And we go off to this school, which is I mean bare bones. But it's 3 stories up. And 8-year-olds, they're on the 3rd story. I said, load them up, guys. We're going up 3 stories. And no elevators. So cameras and all this equipment goes upstairs. And this poor Chinese lady who's the teacher, the principal said, there are 4 classes of 8-year-olds. Which one do you want? I said, I'll take the 3rd one. So I'm directing the tour. And when we go in this classroom, these kids go into shock. They've never seen round eyes before, let alone a black person. Sharon Cornegay was with us. And all they wanted to do was touch her. I mean, they were absolutely in shock. And this poor little teacher must have been 20 years old. What do you want to see? I said, I want to tell your kids where we're from, why we're here, and how important China is in the world. And then they can ask me any questions they want. They couldn't speak English, I assumed wrong. So they decided to sing a song for us. And so a bunch of the 8-year-olds go up to the front of the room and they sing a song to us. Well, meanwhile, I sit down in this one little girl's seat. The desks are 2 by 2. I sit down in her seat as she got up to go up and sing to us. And I looked at her chalkboard. They didn't have paper then. They have chalkboards. So I look at her chalkboard, and man, you talk about a life-determining moment. On her chalkboard was run, Dick, run. See, spot, jump. We had interrupted their English class. Now that little girl is 22 years old today, or somewhere in that age. And who owns the biggest chunk of our country? The people who know our language and studied it from day one all the way. They couldn't get out of elementary school unless they could pass their English test. So I come back to the United States. I'm in shock. Come back to the United States, I can't get Jim Heyer on the phone fast enough. I said, Jim, if my kids want to learn Chinese, where do they go? Well, they can go to Ohio State, or they can go to the Columbus Alternative High School if they get in, and they can, and we can arrange special classes for them. Not only is the difference compelling, today, now 30 years later, the compellingness is seen in the Wall Street Journal on who owns America. Well, it's not a bunch of Russians. It's a bunch of Chinese that read, write, and understand our language. Hell, you couldn't find 10 people going down Broad Street or High Street that know Cantonese or Mandarin Chinese. So anyway, that was the most defining moment in my 8 years.
Michael.
Hi, Mayor. Mike Shannon. I had the pleasure of spending about every day of my life from 1984 through 92 and working for you. And I always had one question I never had the intestinal fortitude to ask you. And that relates to the Ohio Penn. Then I have one follow-up question. Why did you tell all the TV media and reporters that I had approved the demolition for that?
I knew, Mike, you would support me. No one else on my staff supported me.
8 years and no noticeable side effects. The last question, Your Honor. I wonder if you remember a recalcitrant property owner on High Street that happened to own the 40 carats and how you were able to deal with that building. Thank you, Your Honor.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. You haven't changed a damn bit. Don't ever change. August of 1989, we're going to open City Center Mall. It's a big deal. Business leaders, big deal, political, doesn't matter what party. It's a big deal because it's been so long and waiting. And we we kept our $11 million UDAG grant intact thanks to Chalmers Wiley. Anyway, right across this high street from the opening doors is 40 Carats. 40 Carats is a striptease joint, okay? And it's open till 2 in the morning, and then it opens at 9 the next morning, or the morning, and it goes all day, and it's got flashing lights out there. Well, all the business leaders on my ass. Get rid of 40 Carats. I said, I can't get rid of them. They dot every I, cross every T. I mean, they have no building code violations. They have no operational violations. I've had cops in there, like one for every customer. I said, there's nothing I can do. Well, Sunday morning in July, we were opening in August, and I'm in Les Wexner, John W. Wolf, John Fisher, John McCoy, all the Johns, Dan Galbraith. They're on my butt to get rid of 40 Carats. So this Sunday morning, I get a call from the fire chief on the red phone, which means you pick it up. Something's happening bad. 40 Carats is on fire. My first thought was, let the damn thing burn down. But then you got a little problem. We're responsible for the health, safety, and welfare of everybody on High Street, blah, 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 blah. I heard all this from Greg Lashutka. He was the city attorney. So I called Mike Shannon, the one who just spoke. And I said, Mike, you're the head of building regulations or whatever it was, and he's in charge of everything. I said, look, the 40 Carats is on fire. Meet me down there. And I called my cop. I said, you got about 10 seconds to pick me up. And we buzzed down to High Street, and this thing is burning like hell. But the two buildings on either side of it's not burning. And so Mike gets Ralph Lowendick on the phone. Said, we need a wrecking ball down there. This was my first experience with a wrecking ball. Penn was later. So the wrecking ball shows up, and whoever told Al Montgomery or the police chief or the fire chief said, go around back, and it's burning in these big timbers that were put in there in the 20s, and put them out, and take the wrecking ball and knock the bricks down. I said, that's a good idea. Do that. And so this guy did it. Well, he might have had a long night on Saturday night, but he got carried away with a wrecking ball, and he wrecked the building next door. Took it down all the way to the ground, as well as the one that 40 Carats was in. But I'm happy. And I'm going back to home to put on clothes, to go to the office, to call all these business leaders and say, your wish came true, baby. And I had nothing to do with it. So anyway, that created a little friction between me and Greg, because he had to deal with the lawyers. And anyway, that's what happened to 40 Carats. It was owned by a bunch of Arabs, non-resident, and it disappeared, and that sealed my relationship with Les Wexner. Sealed it. So anyway.
Buck, everyone in this room could stand you for a couple more hours, but this club has a great tradition of ending on time, which we're going to do, but I know everybody in the room joins me in wishing you and Brenda many, many years of good health down the road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.